Nervous Conditions is a novel by the Zimbabwean writer, Tsitsi Dangarembga, published in 1988. The semi-autobiographical novel falls under the umbrella of feminist bildungsroman drama, post-colonial African coming-of-age novel. It is set in Rhodesia during 1965 to 1971 and follows cyclic time as the narrative format. It is from the first-person perspective of Tambu, the novel's protagonist. Nervous Conditions is the first of a trilogy, with the Book of Not being the second and This Mournable Body being the third in the series. Don't forget to like and comment. In the 1890s, Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, was colonized by the British South Africa Company. The colonizers built Christian mission schools for African children to control them. These schools aimed to replace African traditions with European beliefs, especially through Christianity. Children were taught in European languages like English or French, and many lost their native languages, as Tambu's cousins, Nyasha and Chido, do in the novel. By the mid-1900s, the white-led Rhodesian government made sure that most education funds, nearly 90%, went to white children. Only a small percentage of black children attended secondary school, and even fewer girls got the chance. Education was seen as a privilege for boys, which made Tambu's journey more remarkable. In 1965, white settlers in Rhodesia refused to accept British conditions for independence, mainly that power should be handed to the black majority. After years of warring resistance, Rhodesia finally became independent in 1980 and was renamed Zimbabwe. Robert Mugabe, leader of a nationalist group, was elected president. While many women voted for his party, few gained real political power. Even those appointed to parliament were mostly symbolic figures. Women were also excluded from important political agreements, such as the Unity Accord of 1987. The novel's title, Nervous Conditions, comes from Jean-Paul Sartre's introduction to Frantz Fanon's book The Wretched of the Earth. Sartre writes that colonizers give native people a nervous condition by controlling them and making them accept their own oppression. Tsitsi Dangarembga builds on Fanon's ideas by showing how African women suffer under colonialism, patriarchal systems like the one in Shona culture. Tambu, a 14-year-old girl, was not sorry when her brother Namo died, and she wants to explain why. She also plans to share the stories of the women in her life, her mother Mainini, her aunts Lucia and Maiguru, and her cousin Nyasha. Tambu started disliking Namo before he died in 1968. Their uncle, Baba Mukuru, who was highly educated, had arranged for Namo to start school early. In 1960, Baba Mukuru went to England to study, taking his wife Maiguru and their children, Nyasha and Chido. While he was away, Tambu's family couldn't afford to keep her in school beyond the first year. Her father, Jeremiah, said girls didn't need education. Her mother told her to accept her role as a woman and prepare for sacrifice. Instead of giving up, Tambu asked for seeds to grow mealies or corn so she could sell it and pay for her own school fees. But when the corn was ripe, someone began stealing it. At Sunday school, she found out Namo was the thief. They fought, and a teacher named Mr. Matimba broke it up. After hearing her story, he took her to the town of Umtilai and helped her sell the remaining corn by telling a white woman that Tambu was an orphan. They raised £10. Tambu's father was angry, but Mr. Matimba argued that with education, Tambu could support the family. Jeremiah was unsuccessful in taking Tambu's money, which she had given to the school's headmaster for safekeeping. Tambu returned to school and studied for 2 more years. When Baba Mukuru's family came back from England, Tambu experienced the gender roles her mother had warned her about. She wasn't allowed to go to the airport, and Namo became the center of attention. Her cousins, Nyasha and Chido, didn't remember how to speak Shona, their native language, which made Tambu feel left out. During the welcome party, Baba Mukuru decided to take Namo to his mission school. Namo taunted Tambu, saying she couldn't go because she was a girl. In the years that followed, Namo distanced himself from the family. He stopped speaking Shona, avoided visits, and looked down on their poverty. Then, in 1968, he suddenly died of mumps. After his funeral, Baba Mukuru chose Tambu to take Namo's place at the mission. Tambu was excited about the opportunity and determined not to become like Namo, who had looked down on his roots. But when she arrived, she was overwhelmed. The mission house was large and intimidating, and she was frightened by the guard dogs. A servant named Anna reassured her. She entered through the kitchen, which was so clean and extravagant it amazed her, though the older Tambu narrator later notes signs that the family lived on a budget. Nyasha surprised Tambu by greeting her warmly. The living room was opulent, and Tambu began to understand why Namo had changed and began to see Baba Mukuru as a godlike figure. Maiguru greeted Tambu casually and didn't respond to her formal greeting. During tea, Tambu was shocked by the amount of food. Nyasha was disrespectful to my guru, which surprised Tambu. My guru simply laughed it off, saying her children had become too westernized. Then, she took Tambu to Nyasha's room, which they would share. Nyasha was reading Lady Chatterley's Lover by D.H. Lawrence, a novel that offended my guru. Later, Nyasha explained that she didn't speak to Tambu at the welcome party because she was scared. She and Cheeto felt like cultural misfits, neither fully African nor fully English, and their parents disapproved of this identity. Dinner that evening was tense for Tambu. The table was filled with unfamiliar dishes, and she worried she wouldn't get enough to eat. Baba Mukuru arrived late, barely spoke, and was upset that there was no gravy. Nyasha went to make some, and Baba Mukuru took her book, which Nyasha believed my guru had taken. Tambu felt embarrassed during the meal when my guru gave her satsa and a spoon, treating her like a child. Later, Baba Mukuru spoke to Tambu about the importance of her education and how much he was sacrificing to send her to school. He reminded her that she had a duty to uplift the family. Back in the bedroom, Tambu didn't know how to turn off the light and didn't wear pajamas. The next morning, she enjoyed her first bath and got through breakfast despite feeling awkward. At school, Tambu did well and was quickly liked by everyone, unlike Nyasha, who didn't have many friends. Tambu began menstruating, and although she was hesitant at first, Nyasha convinced her to use tampons. Tambu also found out that my guru had a master's degree, but despite her education, she didn't control her own money. Tambu felt sorry for her, but still believed that my guru's life couldn't be bad as she was married to the powerful Baba Mukuru. Baba Mukuru sends Cheeto to Salisbury to attend a mostly white secondary school. Near the end of Tambu's first year at the mission, Nyasha takes her public exams. She's extremely stressed, studies all the time and loses weight. After the exams, the school hosts a Christmas party. Nyasha, Tambu, and Cheeto enjoy the dance, and Andy, one of Tambu's friend Niradzo's older brothers, walks them home. Cheeto and Tambu go inside without Nyasha. When Baba Mukuru realizes she's still outside, he gets angry. When Nyasha returns, he accuses her of behaving indecently and beats her. Tambu is shaken. She realizes that Baba Mukuru, whom she once admired, can also mistreat women, just as Namo had belittled her for being a girl. A week later, the family travels to the rural homestead for Christmas, their car full of supplies, including half an ox. My guru is already upset because, as the senior wife, she will have to do all the cooking. At the homestead, they are greeted by Netsai and Rambanai. Baba Mukuru is shocked to see that Lucia, Tambu's bold and outspoken aunt, and Takeshur, who made Lucia pregnant, are also there. Takeshur already has 2 wives and doesn't want to work. Baba Mukuru had told both of them to leave before. Tambu helps carry food and visits her sick, pregnant mother. More relatives arrive, including Tet Gladys and Uncle Thomas, but only the women, my guru, Nyasha, Tambu, and the serving girls, do the work for 27 guests. My guru cooks for everyone and struggles to make the meat last. It soon starts to rot. She prepares special rice for the male elders using her Dover stove. After New Year's, Baba Mukuru calls a family meeting to deal with Lucia and Takeshur. The women, not invited, listen in. During the meeting, Takeshur accuses Lucia of witchcraft. Lucia storms in, grabs him by the ears, and threatens to leave with Mainini. Then Jeremiah suggests they hire a spirit medium to cleanse the family. But Baba Mukuru says the real problem is that Jeremiah and Mainini are not officially married and living in sin. He insists on arranging a wedding. Though her relatives laugh off the idea, Tambu feels deeply disturbed. To her, the wedding would turn her parents' life into a joke, but she also feels like she can't question Baba Mukuru. After 3 weeks, Tambu returns to the mission. In March, Mainini gave birth to a baby boy. While she's recovering at the hospital, Lucia asks Baba Mukuru to help her get a job, and surprisingly, he agrees. Nyasha says that people like Baba Mukuru should help people like Lucia. As the wedding approaches, Tambu becomes more upset. Though her bridesmaid dress fits perfectly, she doesn't want to attend. On the wedding day, she refuses to go. Baba Mukuru punishes her by lashing her 15 times and making her do chores for 2 weeks. Lucia is angry when she finds out, and my guru also becomes frustrated. She tells Baba Mukuru she's tired of serving his family without appreciation and leaves the next morning. She's gone for a week. Cheeto finds out where she is, and Baba Mukuru brings her back. Later in the school term before Tambu's grade 7 exams, Catholic nuns visit the mission school and give a surprise test. It turns out to be an entrance exam for a Catholic boarding school called Sacred Heart. Thanks to Nyasha's books and conversations, Tambu has learned how to think critically, and she passes the test and wins a scholarship. Nyasha warns her that the nuns will try to erase her culture and not to fall for their tricks, and Baba Mukuru agrees. But Maiguru disagrees and stands up to her husband and insists that Tambu go. During the Christmas break, Baba Mukuru discusses it with Tambu's father, Jeremiah, and they agree she should attend. Tambu is thrilled. However, Mainini is terrified Tambu will die if she goes. She falls ill from worry and only gets better after Lucia visits and comforts her. Tambu returns to the mission by bus. She's excited to see Nyasha again, but Nyasha isn't at home. She finds her studying alone. At dinner, Baba Mukuru forces Nyasha to eat everything on her plate. Tambu later hears her throwing up. Despite her concerns, Tambu is excited about her new school. Nyasha and Baba Mukuru take her there. Tambu is one of only 6 black students and she throws herself into her studies. Nyasha sends her letters but Tambu doesn't reply. She doesn't see Nyasha again until August. When they reunite, Tambu is shocked. Nyasha has grown skeletal, vomits after every meal, and one night faints at the dinner table. Later that night, Nyasha has a breakdown, screaming that they have done this to her. Baba Mukuru takes her to a psychiatrist, who dismisses her condition, saying Africans don't suffer in this way. But a different doctor admitted her to a clinic. Tambu goes home for a few weeks. Mainini declares that this obsession with Englishness will destroy them. Still, Tambu returns to school. Only much later will she begin to question everything. Quietly, unobtrusively, and extremely fitfully, something in my mind began to assert itself, to question things and refuse to be brainwashed. Bringing me to this time when I can set down this story. Let's thematically analyze nervous conditions by Dangarembga. The title Nervous Conditions refers to how colonization affects the minds and identities of its characters. For Tambu, this nervous condition begins when she leaves her village to study at the mission school. At first, she believes education is the only way to escape poverty, but over time, she starts to feel caught between 2 worlds. Her traditional Shona roots and the Western, Christian values taught at the mission. When Baba Mukuru arranges a Christian wedding for her parents, Tambu refuses to attend because she is angry with Baba Mukuru for calling them sinners. At the same time, she feels ashamed and confused, unable to express her anger because she is grateful to him for her education. She is torn between loyalty and resentment, which reflects the emotional cost of living under colonial values. Nyasha's struggle is more severe and visible. Unlike Tambu, Nyasha was raised in England for 5 years and knows very little about Shona culture. When she returns to Rhodesia, she finds herself lost between 2 identities. She can't speak Shona fluently and doesn't relate to traditional customs. Baba Mukuru cannot accept her Western behavior, short skirts, makeup, and strong opinions. Nyasha's mental health starts to decline, and she develops bulimia, a condition few Africans recognized at the time. A white psychiatrist dismisses her illness, claiming that such disorders don't affect Africans, further isolating her. Nyasha becomes an example of how damaging it is to live between cultures, rejected by her parents for being too Western and ignored by the colonial system for not being white. When Tambu hears from Nyasha that she wasn't being ignored at a party, but that Nyasha simply couldn't speak Shona well anymore, Tambu starts to understand the depth of Nyasha's alienation. Tambu also sees how Baba Mukuru and Maiguru are constantly frustrated with Nyasha's Western behavior, yet they are partly responsible for it. They sent her to England and now blame her for the transformation. Chido, Nyasha's brother, also embraces Western culture and forgets his own. Tambu's mother, Mainini, also suffers emotionally. She believes that Englishness stole her children and that this cultural invasion led to Namo's death and Tambu's separation from the family. Mainini mourns a cultural disconnection and blames the Western education system and religion, which she sees as tools of colonialism that devalue her traditions. While the mission school offers Tambu a path out of poverty, it also forces her to absorb values that look down upon her culture. When Tambu moves in with Baba Mukuru and Maiguru, she sees how colonialism works within a family. Namo, after attending school for a few years, forgets how to speak Shona and begins to look down on life at the homestead. After his death, Tambu reflects that while she didn't mourn him personally, she pitied him because I was not sorry that he had died, but I was sorry for him because, according to his standards, his life had been thoroughly worth living. She realizes that his pride came from a system that taught him to reject his origins. However, Tambu's thoughts evolve over time. At first, she is eager to follow Baba Mukuru's rules and sees Nyasha's defiance as ungrateful. But as she gets older, she starts to notice the unfairness and pressure built into the system she once admired. When Baba Mukuru blames family misfortunes on her parents' sinful marriage and insists on a Christian wedding, Tambu is shaken. She realizes that Babamukuru, though black himself, has internalized colonial ideas so deeply that he humiliates his own family in the name of Christian morality. Tambu begins to question whether her education is worth the cost of losing her identity. When Tambu refuses to attend the wedding, making her first real choice against colonial values, she begins to see that colonialism makes her ashamed of her background and teaches Africans to reject their own culture. Tambu eventually realizes that the education system she once admired is designed to control Africans. The nuns at her convent school force all the black students to live together in one small room. The government decides whether black children are sufficiently developed cognitively to receive education. Nervous conditions makes it clear that colonialism invades all nations, families, languages, and the self. In nervous conditions, every man Tambu encounters is shaped by a patriarchal society that teaches them to expect obedience and power. Namo is chosen to go to school instead of her. He mocks her by saying, "Why are you jealous anyway? Did you ever hear of a girl being taken away to school?" His words come from a belief in male superiority. Later, Tambu reflects that Namo's views weren't just his own, sincere in his bigotry. But in those days I took a rosy view of male nature. As a child, she assumed he only said such things to upset her, but she realized that society itself was trying to keep her down. Tambu's first major confrontation with patriarchal power comes when she moves in with Babamukuru. Babamukuru is her benefactor and the one who provides for her education, but he is also deeply conservative. He believes in strict Christian values and expects women to be submissive. Tambu is torn between gratitude and growing discomfort. Because she relies on him, she feels she cannot challenge him when his behavior upsets her. For example, when Nyasha stays out late after a school dance, Babamukuru assumes she has behaved immorally and beats her. Tambu, witnessing this violence, realizes that Babamukuru is a man who uses patriarchal authority to control women. Babamukuru's influence is so strong that even Tambu's school life is affected by it. Although she gets to attend school, her path is full of gender-based obstacles. The family could only afford to send one child to school, and they chose Namo simply because he was a boy. When Namo dies, it's only then that Tambu gets a chance, but she must constantly prove herself and ask for permission. To attend the convent school, she must convince Babamukuru and her father, who believes a girl's future should be spent cooking, cleaning, and raising children. When Tambu complains, Jeremiah and her mother remind her that she is a girl, and so her dreams don't matter in the same way. Tambu realizes that the needs and sensibilities of the women in my family were not considered a priority, or even legitimate. Minini is an example of what happens when a woman is denied education and choice. She lives in poverty, working herself to exhaustion in the fields every day while her husband, Jeremiah, avoids hard labor. Minini accepts this life because she has no other options. In contrast, Tambu initially idolizes her aunt Maiguru, who has a master's degree and lives in a comfortable home. But once Tambu moves in with Babamukuru and Maiguru, she starts to notice that Maiguru, despite being educated and employed, has no control over her own money. She is expected to cook, clean, and host Babamukuru's extended family without complaint. For instance, during the holidays, Maiguru is responsible for cooking for over 20 guests, and although she carries out the task, she later tells Babamukuru that she is tired of being treated like a servant. Eventually, Maiguru takes a stand. After an argument with Babamukuru, she leaves him for 5 days. Her departure shocks the family, but it's one of the few moments where a woman in the novel successfully claims some independence. Maiguru returns on her own terms and later insists that Tambu should be allowed to attend the convent school when Babamukuru hesitates. Lucia, Tambu's outspoken and unmarried aunt, offers another example of resistance. When Babamukuru calls a family meeting to discuss her pregnancy, she is not invited, though the issue directly concerns her. In the meeting, Takeshur accuses Lucia of witchcraft, and Jeremiah claims he might be the baby's father. However, Lucia doesn't stay silent. She storms into the room, grabs Takeshur by the ears, and defends herself. She threatens to leave with Mainini, showing that she will not accept being humiliated. Her boldness forces Babamukuru to treat her with more respect, and he finds her a job at the mission school. Lucia's defiance earns her a measure of autonomy. Unlike Tambu, Nyasha was raised in England, where she experienced a more equal society. When she returns to Rhodesia, she refuses to follow the traditional expectations of how a girl should behave. She argues with her father, reads controversial books like Lady Chatterley's Lover, and tries to assert her independence. But Babamukuru cannot tolerate her rebellion, so he beats her and constantly criticizes her behavior. Nyasha's resistance doesn't earn her respect but isolates her. With no real support, she begins to suffer from anorexia and bulimia. Tambu sees her throwing up after meals and later finds her fainting at the dinner table. One night, Nyasha has a mental breakdown, screaming that they've done it to her. Her father takes her to a psychiatrist, who dismisses her pain by saying Africans don't get eating disorders. Only later is she admitted to a clinic. As Tambu rises through the education system, she sees how the women around her are overlooked, mistreated, or silenced. Whether it's her mother laboring in the fields, Maiguru cooking for guests without appreciation, or Lucia being accused without being heard, the message is the same. Being a woman in a patriarchal society means fighting to be seen, heard, and be free. When Tambu's family cannot afford to send her to school, she decides to grow her own corn. Her goal is to sell the corn and use the money to pay her own school fees. This garden becomes a symbol of her independence. Using the farming skills she learned on the homestead, Tambu works hard to grow the crop, proving that she can take control of her own future. On one hand, it connects Tambu to her roots and traditions. Growing food from the land is something her family has done for generations, and Tambu remembers helping her grandmother in the garden with affection. On the other hand, the garden also represents escape from tradition. Tambu hopes that by selling her corn, she can get an education and leave behind the life of endless labor that women like her mother endure. Ironically, the better her education, the less likely Tambu will ever have to grow a garden again. That contrast, between her physical labor in the field and the future freedom that labor might buy, is compelling. Meanwhile, her mother still has to water the garden despite being completely exhausted, showing how much harder life remains for women who don't have a way out. The garden also highlights the gender bias in their culture. In Shona society, female independence is not encouraged. That's why Namo tries to sabotage her efforts by stealing her corn. As he looks down on Tambu for being a girl, he tries to stop her from succeeding on her own. The garden becomes a space where tradition and resistance meet. Hope you share and subscribe.